The Vampire Bride. Henry Thomas Liddell. Say why on this day, by the morn's first ray, with the church doors opened wide, while the bells they ring and the choristers sing, say, what may this betide? The bells they ring and the choristers sing, and the church doors are opened wide, for Albert the Gay on this holy day to the altar leads his bride. With trumpets and drums, all trembling she comes beneath her bridal veil, so shrinks below its shroud of snow the early primrose pale. But Albert among the glittering throng his prancing steed bestrode, with plumed hat and robe of state full royally he rode. At the stately porch of St. Peter's Church alight the blooming pair, and the proud aisles rang as the choristers sang to bid them welcome there. The holy priest hath their union blessed, and now in the sight of heaven eternal troth is sworn by both, and the mutual pledge is given. A ring so rare, of emerald fair, he placed her finger upon, and in true token of faith unbroken she gave him a sapphire stone. With hand joined to hand at the altar they stand, and loudly the choristers sing, when a shuddering came over Albert's frame, and he dropped his bridal ring. As downward he bent with swift intent that precious ring to save, he heard a groan 'neath the altar stone, and the church smelled like a grave. And a death-like chill through his veins did thrill, and his heart beat thick with fear, and his head swam round, for that ghastly sound was more than a mortal might bear. But he sprang up in haste, and his ring he held fast, and he gazed on his virgin bride, and her hand he pressed to his beating breast, and his heart swelled again with pride. And the cloud no more on his brow did lower, as she leaned his arm upon, so the blackness of night on the mountain's height is chased by the summer sun. He led her straight to his palace gate, while gaily the vivas sound, for the lordly train, as they left the fane, did scatter angels round. In her bridesmaid's care that lady fair retires for repose at noon. It was idless all in the palace hall, as the flagging hours creep on. The gallants resort to the tennis court, and the bridegroom joined them there, for when was there a manly sport that Albert would not share? And soon 'tis his chance the score to advance, when his ring he again let fall, and lo, close at hand did a statue stand on its marble pedestal. 'Twas of sculpture rare, and passing fair, a girdle bound its waist, and words unknown on the circling zone mysteriously were traced. The right hand did rest on its swelling breast, the left was forward flung, as of one who in fear at the sound she did hear in mute attention hung. "'Tis a goodly thought," says Albert, caught by the bright and prophet hand, and without more delay on the finger of clay he slid the mystic band. But was it a dream, or did the figure seem to vibrate to me alone? And did the sun's ray bewilder me, or say, did a smile wreathe its lips of stone? Above and around the ball did bound, and the hall rung with many a jest, yet a boding drear thrilled in Albert's ear, and strange thoughts his heart oppressed. 'Tis the hour to prepare for the bridal cheer, and the grooms for Albert call, for in jewelled state doth the bride await her guests in the palace hall. But Albert in vain strove his ring to regain from the finger of marble fair. Brightly it shone, while it clove to the stone, as though it were frozen there. Fast and faster it clove, still he earnestly strove to detach that charmed gold, when the finger of stone doubled slowly down, and the bridegroom's blood ran cold. A page stood near Count Albert's chair to wait his lord's behest, with laughing cheek and rosy neck beneath his broidered vest. Come hither, my little foot page, for ere yon sand be run, by the torch's light or the moonbeam bright, an errand must be done. To the courts below thou must quickly go, to the court where we toss the ball. There with outstretched hand doth a statue stand on its marble pedestal. With incautious haste on that hand I placed this noon a sapphire stone. No more it may linger on the marble finger, so haste thee, my page, and be gone. And mark me, take a hammer to break the finger that doubled down, for there is the ring that I bid thee bring. Now speed me mine errand and run. The sand is run, the errand is done, but the boy came trembling back, and the rosy red from his cheek hath fled, and his limbs they quiver and quake. Oh, master dear, no ring is there, no finger bent at all, but the statue doth stand with extended hand on its lofty pedestal. It gleamed wan and white in the pale moonlight, and the courts looked chill and drear. Methought it did smile as I gazed the while. I well-nigh swooned for fear. Unmoved by a breeze, the tall cypress trees moaned and waved in the silent air, and a meteor star shot swift and far through the sparkling hemisphere. And the bats unclean with leathern skin flapped heavily around, and a strange dog did howl while shrieked the owl, and like a grave smelled the ground. Back shrunk the page, for an ashen hue spread wide over Albert's cheek, and there stood on his brow clammy drops of dew, and in vain he essayed to speak. But the red wine he quaffed, and he fearfully laughed, but he drew a long sigh between. His hand he passed o'er his brow in haste, then rose and changed the scene. The bridesmaids are gone, and the bride left alone, and the sounds of mirth are fled, and Albert, released from the dance and the feast, hath sought the nuptial bed. But his heart beat quick, and his breath came thick, and a nameless dread crept o'er him. Yet he turned with delight to his lady bright, reclined in her beauty before him. He turned unto his lady true, and he felt her fluttering breath, when an icy chill through his veins did thrill, and he shrunk from the grasp of death. And a bitter, bitter cry broke forth in agony, "Save me, for mercy's sake!" For in his arms he did hold a figure damp and cold, and the couch smelled like a grave. Thou this day didst me wed, and I come to thy bed thy nuptial joys to share, and in token true the sapphire blue on my finger still I wear. Another bitter cry, and he senseless did lie, for the phantom marble pressed its loathsome form 'gainst his bosom warm, and he weighed down his labouring breast. And ever and anon murmured the lips of stone, "This bridal couch is thine, to thy bed I come, but ere 3 days are gone, Albert, thou comest to mine." The morning light hath dispelled the night, and happy Albert lay, with throbbing head on his nuptial bed, cold as the coffined clay. But the demon guest from his struggling breast had its icy grasp withdrawn. Away it flew as the first cock crew, in sign of the blushing dawn. And his faithful bride, who lay by his side, awoke at the selfsame hour, for a slumber deep did her senses steep, while the spectre bride had power. Devoutly she prayed to the Virgin for aid, for her heart beat with nameless fears. She laid her warm cheek on her Albert's neck, and fast fell the trickling tears. And she folded his face in her tender embrace, and her soft and balmy breath thawed the icy chains which froze his veins, and dispelled the shades of death. "Now send for the priest, let my sins be confessed. Short space to me is given. Though the demon claim my mortal frame, yet my soul may find rest in heaven." The holy priest hath his sins confessed, and now with shuddering cold, of his summons dread to the phantom's bed, hath Albert darkly told. And how by some spell of the powers of hell she had gained his sapphire stone, and in right of that ring, how the foul... And how by some spell of the powers of hell she had gained his sapphire stone, and in right of that ring, how the foul damp thing did claim him for her own. The priest turned pale at the ghostly tale, and he shook his tonsured head, and the livelong day he did fast and pray beside the sufferer's bed. Cold horror sate in those halls of state which had echoed the nuptial song, and the bridal wreath seemed the emblem of death, and fear froze every tongue. The second night came, but the taper's flame dispelled the thickening gloom, for they trusted with prayer the fiend to scare, if again she sought the room. And a cross of gold the priest did hold, and at intervals they raise, in chorus meet, the vespers sweet, to the blessed Virgin's praise. And his faithful bride lay awake by his side till St. Peter's clock told 1, when a slumber deep o'er her senses did. And his faithful bride lay awake by his side till St. Peter's clock told 1, when a slumber deep o'er her senses did creep, for the demon's power had begun. The taper's light was extinguished quite, and the choristers all dropped to rest, and the priest sunk down like a monument stone with the cross on his bosom pressed. And again a bitter cry broke forth in agony, "Save me, for mercy, save!" For Albert did hold the spectre damp and cold, and the couch smelled like a grave. I am come once again from the tomb, in return for the ring which you gave. That I am thine, and that thou art mine, this nuptial pledge receive. He lay like a corpse 'neath the demon's force, and she wrapped him in a shroud, and she fixed her teeth his heart beneath, and she drank of the warm life blood. And ever and anon murmured the lips of stone, "Soft and warm is this couch of thine. Thou'lt tomorrow be laid on a colder bed. Albert, that bed will be mine." Another bitter cry, and he senseless did lie, for the fiend sucked his stifled breath, and the blood flowed fast from his wounded breast, and he suffered the pangs of death. The morning light hath chased the night, and the fiend hath its grasp withdrawn. Away it flew as the first cock crew, in sign of the blushing dawn. And the startled priest and the watchers in haste from unearthly slumbers broke, for the nightmare's weight on their lungs had sate, and the breath in their throats did choke. With stiffened limb and eyeballs dim, cold as the coffined clay, where his blood ran red o'er the nuptial bed, expiring Albert lay. But his faithful bride, who lay by his side, was still wrapped in slumber deep, and her soft lips smiled like a dreaming child. 'Twas a pure and an holy sleep. At length, like the rose in the morning that blows, her eyelids from slumber awake, and like dewdrops her tears mingle soft with her prayers for her suffering Albert's sake. But she folded his face in her tender embrace, and her warm and virgin breath thawed the icy chains that froze his veins, and dispelled the shades of death. And words of good cheer she breathed in his ear, and with steady hand and calm, and with cheek unblenched, his wound she stanched with juice of the healing balm. "O Albert, be cheered, my prayers have been heard, for lo, in her mercy mild, the Mother of God before me stood, and kissed her sleeping child. She bade me dig down 'neath the altar stone in St. Peter's holy dome, and thence shall I bring the sapphire ring in triumph from the tomb. She is gone to the fane with a priestly train, with vestment and banner and cross. The church bells they ring, and the choristers sing, and the censers they zealously toss. Then with pickaxe and spade 10 labourers essayed the ponderous stone to move, and though the priests sung and the censer swung, in vain the labourers strove. But in purpose stout and with heart devout is the virtuous maiden gone. When the virtuous maid lent her feeble aid, upsprung the lightened stone. 5 yards underground coffin they found of strange unwonted shape, and the cold wet clay was red where it lay, and the coffin lid did gape. They lifted the lid, and the shroud they undid, but what they saw underneath, the horrible sight that congealed them quite, I almost fear to breathe. Beneath a shroud, stained and spotted with blood, a female naked lay. On her clenched hand shone a sapphire stone. In her corpse there was no decay. Her eyes did stare with a demon glare, a girdle bound her waist, and words unknown on the charmed zone mysteriously were traced. Her veins accursed seemed ready to burst, she was gorged with infernal food, and the vampire mouth foamed with crimson froth, her very pores oozed blood. The labourer shrunk and fainting sunk back from the hideous sight, and the priests fled the church and rushed out at the porch. They almost went mad with affright. But the virgin bride in her maiden pride and her love and virtue brave, a crucifix pressed to her noble breast, and sprung into the grave. That which was given in the sight of heaven I bid thee, fiend, restore. That ring I claim in his awful name, whom the powers of hell adore. By his holy sign I bid thee resign, demon, thy right forever, whom God doth join at his sacred shrine. Presume not thou to sever. The vampire shook at the words she spoke. In an instant the palm opened wide. From its finger she drew the sapphire blue, as drops from the icicle glide. When the zone they unlaced from around its waist, its bright eyes with fury gleamed. When they thrust a dart through its swollen heart, it convulsively shivered and screamed. And the red blood thereout did gush and did spout, till it sprinkled the chancel roof. So vehement it sprung, that no fountain e'er flung with like force its waters aloof. But the carcass foul of the carrion ghoul grew flaccid and meagre and thin, as a huge bladder blown, where the air is gone, shrivels up into wrinkled skin. They lifted the bier from its sepulchral. Holy water they sprinkled around, and lo, where it lay on the blood-stained clay, a passage went underground. They lifted the bier from its sepulchral. Holy water they sprinkled around, and lo, where it lay on the blood-stained clay, a passage went underground. It led to the tombs and the long catacombs beneath the churchyard wall, where the ghouls and sprites keep on Sabbath nights their unholy carnival. And spiders unclean and huge earth grubs were seen beneath the coffin to twine, but the spider and worm owned the power of the charm, for never a one crawled within. From the loathing shrine of St. Peter Divine they cast the vampire forth, but none could declare how it ever came there in consecrated earth. To the ramparts they hurried, the carcass unburied, where the murderer's limbs are thrown, where the foxes prowl and the gaunt wolves howl as they gnash the mangled bone. 'Twas noon, but a lurid and sulphurous glare eclipsed the meridian sun. A sickly heat taints the murky air, a whirlwind comes rushing on. It came rushing and roaring like a cataract pouring over a mountain rock, and the crashing thunder rent the vapours asunder. It was felt like an earthquake's shock. The flashing levin from the blood-red heaven blazed o'er the vampire dead. It came rushing and roaring like a cataract pouring over a mountain rock, and the crashing thunder rent the vapours asunder. It was felt like an earthquake's shock. The flashing levin from the blood-red heaven blazed o'er the vampire dead, when the hurricane roar was heard no more. Corpse, coffin, and girdle were fled. And the self-same flash to the pavement did dash in fragments the cinctured stone. So the wrath divine in Philistia's shrine hurled Dagon from his throne. 'Twere long to relate what joys await Albert recalled to life, but this believe that none e'er did receive a more faithful and virtuous wife. When he saw the well-known ring of sapphire stone, tears of joy streamed down his cheek. When his bride he pressed to his grateful breast, his heart swelled, but he could not speak. But once in each year the livelong night is spent in devotion and prayer. On the fatal night of the vampire's bite, blood runs from his bosom scar. Until morning light doth his lady bright hymns to the virgin sing, as the fiendish wail sounds along the gale, bemoaning the sapphire ring.